Thanks for your support as a channel member, Justin Inakaitis! I simulated the 2025 F1 season on F1 Manager with every driver rated 100 after firing them all at the start of the season. I've done a similar experiment with a 100 rated grid before, which saw Aston Martin's Lance Stroll become world champion. And this time, we're also maxing out the car performance for all teams, meaning the drivers have cars to match their abilities. After maxing out every driver's stats, I sacked them all from their respective 2025 teams. I then moved the game on a couple of days to see where all the drivers ended up, and we got some interesting results. The notable pairings are Verstappen and Norris at Red Bull, and Alonso rejoins Alpine again, and he's alongside 2007 teammate Lewis Hamilton. George Russell is at McLaren, Charles Leclerc has gone to Racing Bulls, Oscar Piastri's moved to Mercedes, and Carlos Sainz has stayed with Williams. Ferrari have signed the real-life Sauber pairing of Hülkenberg and Bortoleto. I've also maxed out the facilities for every team, as well as putting them $100 million in debt, so they can't afford to put upgrades on the car. That's because any upgrades will actually be downgrades. I've also given every team 30 of the base spec parts, in the hope that they don't run out and don't need to replace them. Before we head to the first race in Australia, I want you to predict in the comments how many drivers will win a Grand Prix across this season. I'm going to say 9 drivers win a race. Jack Doohan takes pole position for his home race in Melbourne, with Lance Stroll Sauber joining him on the front row. Max Verstappen was involved in an early collision with the Haas of Tsunoda, dropping the defending champion to last early on. Bortoleto had been heading for points with Ferrari on debut, but this spin dropped him out of contention. Then pole sitter Doohan blew his chance of a home podium with this mistake. It was eventually George Russell in the McLaren who took the win ahead of Isaac Hadjar and Oliver Bearman. The Alpines of Alonso and Hamilton moved up multiple places to finish in the top 5 ahead of Gasly, Tsunoda, Norris, Verstappen and Antonelli. On to round 2 in China, and Lando Norris took the sprint victory ahead of Russell. Alex Albon took pole in all Racing Bulls front row with Norris in third, and the tyre driver would go on to win the race ahead of Leclerc, with Ferrari's Bortoleto joining them on the podium. Bearman was 4th ahead of Hülkenberg's Ferrari. Lawson, Antonelli, Doohan, Tsunoda and Ocon also picked up points. Red Bull had a disastrous race. Verstappen got damage on lap 1, while sprint winner Norris picked up damage in this collision with Hadjar, and then later had this spin as the pair were the last of the finishers. Russell has an early 3-point lead over Albon after 2 races, with Bearman a further 2 points back in third. Round 3 takes us to Japan, where we had a Sauber front row lockout. What? Stroll was on pole ahead of Antonelli, and the pole sitter was looking good for at least a podium until this puncture derailed his progress. Instead, victory went to Isaac Hadjar in the Haas, holding off George Russell's McLaren. It was a double podium for the American team, as Yuki Tsunoda bagged P3 at his home event. Albon took 4th, Lawson, Leclerc, Hülkenberg and Gasly all made the points after exiting qualifying in Q1. Antonelli and Alonso were the final scorers. Russell increases his championship lead, it's now 7 over our latest race winner, Isaac Hadjar. Norris was our 4th different Grand Prix pole sitter of the year in Bahrain, but a mechanical fault saw him tumble down the order. Bearman and Antonelli had this collision fighting over the lead, ruining both of their races, and Norris's race was further dented by this spin. After 57 laps of hard racing, it was Isaac Hadjar who came through to become our first repeat winner and take the championship lead, as Russell finished in 16th. Leclerc held off Ocon for 2nd, as Albon was 4th once again. Tsunoda picked up 5th ahead of Piastri and Hamilton, with Verstappen 8th, Stroll 9th and Doohan in P10. Hadjar now leads Albon by 15 points at the head of the championship, as Racing Bulls take the Constructors' Championship lead. Norris was again on pole in Jeddah, with Stroll joining him at the front. The race was stopped early on though after Verstappen and Bortoleto collided at turn 1, and the race was halted for a second time when Doohan and Ocon crashed at the final corner. Liam Lawson caused a 3rd stoppage with this crash. Eventually it was McLaren's Ollie Bearman who came through the carnage to score the win. Tsunoda picked up another podium in 2nd ahead of Norris. Championship leader Hadjar was 4th, with Piastri 5th and Stroll in 6th. Antonelli, Leclerc, Russell and Alonso completed the top 10. With Albon failing to score, Hadjar now has a 27-point advantage over the chasing pack. 2nd to 6th is covered by just 2 points. Haas now take over the lead at the top of the Constructors' table. Miami hosted our 2nd sprint of the year, with Albon taking 7 points out of Hadjar's title lead with victory, as the Frenchman finished in 8th. Stroll was 2nd ahead of Leclerc, the Red Bulls, Antonelli and Tsunoda. and the Canadian driver would start from Grand Prix pole position. But Stroll was forced to settle for second place again as Leclerc passed him at the final turn to snatch victory. Albon nibbled more points out of Hadjar's lead with third, although Leclerc moved into second ahead of his teammate. The Haas driver's lead is now down to just 7 points. Gasly, Tsunoda, Antonelli, Lawson and Hamilton were the remaining points finishers. Albon took pole ahead of a wet race at Emilia with championship leader Hadjar 17th on the grid, but Albon blew his chances of winning by smashing into Pierre Gasly's Aston Martin. Championship leader Hadjar lost time and places with this spin. It was the other Haas of Yuki Tsunoda who successfully navigated his way to the top step of the podium, taking the team's third win of the year. Bortoleto and Behrman joined the Japanese driver on the podium. Verstappen was 4th for Red Bull and Lawson 5th for Aston Martin. Sainz finished 7th behind Piastri as Albon recovered to 8th ahead of Ocon and Russell. Tsunoda's win draws him level with Leclerc, 7 points off the championship summit. Haas retake the Constructors' Championship lead. World champion Max Verstappen took pole for Monaco with Leclerc the highest placed championship contender in P8. And the Dutchman converted that pole into victory, holding off a challenge from Nico Hülkenberg in the Ferrari. Doohan pipped his Williams teammate Sainz to a podium place as Ocon, Norris, Bortoleto, Lawson, Russell and Gasly collected points in the Principality. The top 5 drivers in the standings all failed to score, with 6th place Russell gaining only 2 points. Verstappen's win sees him rise to the top 10. Spain saw a maiden pole position for Kimi Antonelli with Max Verstappen alongside. Championship contender Albon found himself in the lead but handed P1 to Gasly thanks to a puncture. The Frenchman went on to seal the win ahead of Antonelli and Verstappen. Hadjar capitalised on one of his title rivals fumbling a big result by finishing in 4th ahead of Bortoleto and Ocon. Behrman, Doohan, Hülkenberg and Alonso rounded out the point scorers. Hadjar's points lead grows to 19 as his 3 closest rivals all failed to pick up points for the second race in a row. And there was a home pole position in Montreal as Stroll bagged P1 for the Canadian Grand Prix, but the Sauber man lost the lead to Leclerc through the opening sequence of corners. Stroll had got himself back into first place on lap 23 when Behrman and Albon collided, wrecking their afternoons and their cars. It looked set to be a win for Verstappen or Leclerc until the Monegasque driver ploughed into the back of the Red Bull. It handed the lead to Antonelli in the Sauber. But the young Italian couldn't hang on to the lead as Bortoleto made his way through the pack to claim his maiden F1 win. The Verstappen-Leclerc crash had brought out a safety car, with Bortoleto among those who managed to box for fresh tyres. Championship leader Hadjar finished 2nd, as Lawson gained 14 places to finish 3rd. Tsunoda was 4th, Doohan 5th and Antonelli eventually came home in 6th. Stroll was a disappointed 7th ahead of Hamilton, Hülkenberg and Alonso. Hadjar's championship lead grows to 25 points with teammate Tsunoda now his nearest championship challenger. We move to the Styrian Mountains in Austria next, where Gasly put the Aston Martin on pole position. Red Bull saw one of its cars eliminated from the team's home event as Max Verstappen crashed out. And at the end of 71 laps of furious racing, it was Sauber's Kimi Antonelli who claimed the victory. He missed out in Canada, but the teenager wasn't to be denied in Spielberg. Pole sitter Gasly was 2nd ahead of Tsunoda, Stroll and Doohan. Hadjar collected 6th as his championship lead was slightly trimmed. Lawson, Russell, Hamilton and Albon were the other points finishers. Silverstone was the final round of the first half of the season and Charles Leclerc put his Racing Bull on pole position, but this lock-up at the end of lap 1 sent his victory chances down the drain. Gabriel Bortoleto became just our 2nd repeat winner of the season, taking victory despite having started 11th on the grid. Tsunoda and Hadjar joined him on the podium as Stroll and Hülkenberg delivered top 5 finishes. Verstappen, Albon, Antonelli and the Williams duo also recorded top 10 results. We're halfway through the season and Isaac Hadjar is our championship leader on 144 points. He's 15 ahead of teammate Tsunoda, with Bortoleto now 3rd after winning 2 of the last 3 races. Albon's earlier title challenge is faltering and Leclerc blew a massive opportunity at Silverstone. Haas hold a 102 point advantage on Racing Bulls in the midpoint of the season, with Sauber sneaking ahead of Ferrari in 3rd. Before we tackle the second half of the season, come and join the AHGP Discord server. We share our thoughts on every twist and turn in the F1 season, as well as our passion for other racing categories and sport in general. The link in the description will take you straight to the heart of all the action. The second half of the season kicks off with the 3rd sprint of the season in Spa. The Red Bulls had a significant collision in this race as Verstappen walloped into Norris at the bus stop chicane. After a safety car period, it was Lance Stroll who claimed the 8 points for sprint victory, ahead of pole sitter Lawson. Leclerc was 3rd ahead of Bortoleto, Ocon, Hamilton, Piastri and Hadjar. Tsunoda was 9th. Lawson was again on the front row for the Grand Prix, but Hülkenberg grabbed the pole for Ferrari. Tsunoda had an early spin which caused Stroll to crash into Norris's Red Bull as they all fell to the back. And the Japanese driver was involved in another incident, this time crashing with Alonso and earning himself a 5-second time penalty. Victory eventually went to Hülkenberg, who passed Verstappen through Eau Rouge to snatch the win. The Dutchman was second ahead of Hajar, and Tsunoda failed to score. The McLarens were 4th and 5th ahead of Doohan, Lawson, Leclerc, Sainz and Antonelli. Tsunoda falls to 31 points adrift of Hajar in the title race as the Frenchman tightens his grip on top spot. He's being very consistent, and that's making him very difficult to beat, but his titles are closing in and then finding a way to trip over themselves. Hungary was up next and George Russell took pole for McLaren, but this error relegated him to P last. Then there was a dramatic collision between Hülkenberg and Lawson. I'm not sure the Aston Martin should have survived the contact with the barrier, to be honest. Russell's demise allowed Leclerc to grab the win, holding off Lawson's teammate Pierre Gasly. Norris had a rare good day with 3rd place ahead of the Haas duo as Hajar eked out 2 more points on Tsunoda. Verstappen was 6th ahead of Alonso, Doohan, Sainz and Behrman. Hajar goes into the summer break with a 33-point cushion in the championship, and with 10 races left it's by no means a foregone conclusion, but the Frenchman definitely has control at the moment. Charles Leclerc took pole at Zandvoort as we got back to racing. Championship leader Hajar was down in 14th with Tsunoda in 4th, but the Japanese driver was eliminated after this crash at turn 3 on lap 14. Rain hit the Dutch circuit around halfway through, and it was eventually McLaren's Ollie Behrman who claimed through to clinch the win. He beat the 2 Red Bulls who were fighting all the way to the line. Alonso picked up a fine 4th in the Alpine, while Gasly lamented what could have been in 5th. He had been set to win the race, but this error dropped him down to 8th at the time. Hajar recovered to 7th behind Russell to further extend his championship lead as Albon, Doohan and Lawson completed the points. Max Verstappen took pole in Monza while the Haas pair found themselves 18th and 19th. The pole sitter tumbled to last, however, after this mistake when fighting for the lead. Championship leader Hajar moved up a few spots before falling back to 18th after a lock-up. The race was then red flagged after this collision between Hamilton and Piastri. Albon led the restart, and he was passed by Gasly with the Frenchman taking his 2nd Monza win. Stroll joined them on the podium for Sauber, ahead of Russell, Leclerc, the Red Bulls, Doohan, Antonelli and Lawson. Hajar remains 39 points clear of Tsunoda as Leclerc brings himself back into distant contention. Albon was at the front on the streets of Baku, but the Thai driver crashed out while chasing Verstappen for the lead. Then Hamilton crashed out too, which meant the race was neutralised with a safety car. Victory would eventually go to Verstappen, but Norris was less than a 10th behind in a drag race to the line. Antonelli was 3rd ahead of Lawson, while Hajar further extended his championship lead by 2 points, despite Tsunoda rising 10 places to P6. Doohan, Russell, Stroll and Piastri also scored. Verstappen's 2nd win of the year brings him to 44 points off Hajar. Could he yet salvage his title defence? The Dutchman was on the front row in Singapore with Hajar down in 13th, but Verstappen got shafted by a red flag caused by Gasly as he'd already made his 2nd stop and was set to undercut the leaders, but the stoppage allowed for a free tyre change. Incredibly, it was the other Aston Martin of Lawson who would go on to win, passing Hülkenberg on the final lap to do so. The Kiwi made up 16 positions to reach the top step of the podium. Esteban Ocon joined them up there for Mercedes. Bortoleto finished 4th ahead of Albon, Stroll and Sainz. Tsunoda and Verstappen were 8th and 9th as Hajar limped home in 16th thanks to mechanical issues, meaning his closest rivals had failed to make the most of the opportunity to close the gap. Hamilton picked up the final point for Alpine. Hajar extended his championship lead with 2nd in the Texas sprint. Bortoleto took the victory with his Ferrari teammate Hülkenberg in 3rd. Antonelli was 4th as Albon, Tsunoda, Leclerc and Verstappen finished in the points. The championship's top 3 found themselves starting together for the Grand Prix and outside the top 10. Verstappen and Tsunoda would both go forwards and score points as Stroll led a Sauber 1-2. The Ferraris were 3rd and 4th with Tsunoda 5th. Ocon, Lawson, Norris, Leclerc and Verstappen were the remaining points finishers. Hajar laboured to 15th. Is the pressure getting to the youngster? With 5 races left, Hajar's rivals needed to score big in Mexico, and Verstappen did, clinching victory in a Red Bull 1-2 while Hajar was 6th. Tsunoda finished 11th on a one-stop strategy while everyone else opted for a 2-stop. Stroll joined Verstappen and Norris on the podium for Sauber, just 2/10 ahead of Doohan in 4th. Hülkenberg was 5th while Leclerc, Bortoleto, Hamilton and Ocon scored as well. Verstappen's win vaults him above Tsunoda, but he's still more than a win behind Hajar. We had our 5th sprint round in Brazil where we saw this crash between the Williamses cause a red flag. Hulkenberg would go on to take the win just ahead of Antonelli, as Tsunoda and Verstappen scooped points results in 6th and 8th. Hadjar was only 10th. Bortoleto was 3rd, Albon 4th, Norris 5th and Leclerc 7th. Hadjar took a massive step towards winning the championship by claiming victory in the Grand Prix by just a 10th over Hulkenberg. Verstappen was only 4th as Tsunoda had a dismal day. He collided with Stroll and then had a second crash all by himself. Hadjar's win from 15th on the grid sees him extend his title lead to 42 points, meaning he can become champion in Las Vegas. To become champion, Hadjar needed to outscore Verstappen by 16 points in Sin City. The Frenchman started 3rd and was duelling Norris for the lead when the Red Bull crashed and caused a red flag. By the start of the final lap, Hadjar was still leading, with Verstappen in 12th. The rookie snatched his 4th win of the year after holding off Leclerc's Racing Bull, crowning himself world champion as Verstappen failed to score. Norris won the final sprint race of the year in Qatar before Haas wrapped up the Constructors' title in the Grand Prix, as Tsunoda and Hadjar gained multiple places to score the required points in 8th and 9th. Bortoleto took his 3rd win of the year ahead of Verstappen and Leclerc. Norris would go on to win the final race of the year in Abu Dhabi, with Gasly and Ocon joining him on the podium. Hadjar takes the title in his rookie season by 45 points over Verstappen, who's dethroned after 4 years on top. Leclerc ended up 3rd as Tsunoda's form nosedived in the final 5 rounds. Bortoleto had a strong debut year too, scoring 3 wins on his way to 5th. The sport's most successful driver in history, Lewis Hamilton, he finished bottom of the pile with just 29 points. Haas took the Constructors' crown ahead of Red Bull by 38 points. Racing Bulls, Ferrari and Sauber were covered by just 9 points in their fight over 3rd, while McLaren, Mercedes and Alpine all had disasters. Alpine was the only team not to have a driver on the podium across the entire season. I guess it doesn't matter who you put in that team, it's just doomed to fail. We saw 14 different drivers win races, with the world champion Hadjar achieving the most of anyone with 4. Did any of you guess that number correctly? Bortoleto racked up 3 wins, as did Verstappen, which is very impressive from the Brazilian. Fellow rookies Behrman and Antonelli also stood on the top step as 9 drivers took what would have been their first F1 wins. 16 drivers scored a podium, only Piastri, Sainz, Alonso and Hamilton missed out, which is crazy. And Alex Albon was our qualifying king, scoring 6 pole positions, but he only bagged a single victory. Perhaps he should have achieved more. For context, Hadjar took 4 wins and no pole positions and became world champion. A historic season then, with our first rookie world champion in Isaac Hadjar. I can't believe he's only 68 rated on the F1 25 game, that is madness. Next week's video will be the second half of the 10-year sim where world champions have to retire. Make sure you check out the first part if you haven't already. And we're also taking the live content with this channel over to Twitch moving forwards. I think it gives me a better interaction with the live audience. Come and give me a follow over there. I'll leave a link to the channel in the description. That's all for now, folks. Thanks for watching. You're the best fans. It's bye for now.